Tonight there's really two questions in one. One question may sound familiar to you. It was part of the original 70 questions. Can Hashem do anything that will limit himself? It's an old philosophical question. Can he do something to limit himself? Can he pick up a rock? Can he create a rock that he can't pick up? I mean, that's basically the question that has been asked. The bigger question, which I'm going to spend more time talking about, is since we left off with talking about free will, there's a very important question that is asked philosophically as well. If Hashem knows the future, if he knows in advance what we're going to do, doesn't that in any way limit our free will? So that question needs to be addressed. And somehow they are related. So I first want to talk about the first question. It's not a real question, because obviously Hashem is capable of doing anything, but that's the tricky part of the question, that if he can do almost anything, can he create something that he can't pick up? Can he do something that he would not be able to do? And what's the fallacy of the question? If we ask the question about a wealthy man, let's take a wealthy man who has the means to buy a lot of things. If we can come up with something that's very expensive that he could not buy, then obviously what would that prove? That there's something that he could not buy. Because obviously ultimately the wealth has its limits. The wealth is not the man himself, it's just something that he has acquired. And of course if there's something that he could not buy, that would show weakness or a fault in his wealth, that it's not as complete as we may have thought. So even though we describe this wealthy man as the most wealthiest man in the world, that he can buy himself anything, it is possible to come up with something that he cannot buy if we just make it expensive enough. Whereas with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, that is not possible, because basically what's involved is a contradiction to what his essence really is. The moment we say that he's Kol Yachol, then to say anything that would detract from him would be a contradiction to that essence, and he cannot contradict himself. Either he's a Kol Yachol, or Chaz v'Shalom, it's not. The moment you say he's a Kol Yachol, then it's not possible to introduce a scenario that would make him not Kol Yachol. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu and his ma'asim and his abilities are all one. So you cannot come up with a situation which would go against what his essence is. Therefore, the fact that something like that is not possible does not mean that there is a weakness in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. On the contrary, that is a ma'ala, that is a virtue, that is the greatness of Hashem, it's impossible for that to ever be. He cannot contradict himself, he cannot be what he's not. And he is Kol Yachol, so therefore you cannot even come up with such a scenario that would describe a weakness of sorts, because that's not possible. So that really basically does away with that question. But it's an important question nevertheless, as we will see, because we need to discuss some differences between what we think and what we do, as opposed to the way Hashem thinks and the way Hashem does. But before we go to that, we need to remember that the human being, as much as we are crediting him with having free will and the ability to accomplish a great deal, he is limited. And when we describe the soul and the abilities of the soul, we also mention the fact that nonetheless, the human being in a physical body is constrained, and he cannot fly like a bird, cannot swim like a fish, for those of you who were here then. There are certain physical limitations. Even though he has free will, there's just so much he can do in the physical realm. That was one area of limitation. What's the other area of limitation? As smart as he may be, and he can be very smart, nonetheless, he does not have the ability, and this is an important introduction to understanding Hashem's ways, he does not have the ability ever to comprehend the ways of Hashem. He does not have the ability to observe Hashem directly in this world, the physical world, while we are alive. Not only does Hashem have no shape and form that is observable, we observe his actions, we cannot see him. We are told in the Torah that while a human being is alive, that the neshama is enclosed in this physical body, the physical body is limited. Actually, animals can see many things that we could not see. They can actually see spirits, a disembodied spirit. When your dog all of a sudden begins to bark in the middle of the night, maybe he saw a ghost or a demon. They can see. Their senses can pick up that there's going to be an earthquake. That is why they go crazy. So animals have certain abilities that human beings don't have. We're not even talking about speed and eyesight like the eagle. Those physical abilities, even something which is beyond the physical, what we would call spiritual, to see ghosts, they apparently have that ability. And we explained the reason for that is that the human being was given, or he was endowed with the abilities that he needs for his survival and for his mission in life. We all have a mission. The animal kingdom also has its job and their functions, the birds, the fish, and each one was given what they need for its survival, which includes reproduction, plus whatever it is that they need to accomplish. The human being, of course, has something very special to accomplish, and believe it or not, he by the Creator, he was given the tools, whatever it is that he needs. Each individual needs to accomplish whatever it is that he needs to accomplish. Every human being, man or woman, is special in some way. Each and every one contributes. At least they have the ability. They need to decide to make a contribution, right? They have free will. But they are here for a reason, and they're here for a unique reason. And they were given whatever kelim they need, whatever tools they need to accomplish this mission. So the second limitation is what? That no matter how smart we are and how much free will we have and how capable we are, we cannot comprehend the ways of Hashem. And that's a very important point for those who are beginning to study Judaism. They think that they need to, or they can understand everything, and there is an answer to everything. There is an answer, but you have to go upstairs to get the answer. And I don't think many people are interested to leave this world early to get the answer, right? We want to be around here for as long as possible. But there's something that is just not possible for us to know while we are alive.
We have the idea when Mashiach comes, we will get the answer.
Of course, when Mashiach comes, it's a whole different world. A lot of things will be revealed to us. There will be no Yetzer Hara, right? And in some ways, the free will also be, in some ways, limited too, because there's no Yetzer Hara. Nevertheless, right now in this world, the mind of the human being, as smart as it is, it cannot comprehend everything there is to comprehend. And the third area, B'ezrat Hashem, we will be talking about in a couple of weeks from now. That is a fascinating area, another area that limits the human being in many ways, and that is the area called Mazal, a fascinating area. What is Mazal? An area which is very much misunderstood by people. You know, here we're talking about free will, and all of a sudden we introduce Mazal, which says basically, no, you can't make as much money as you would like to make. It all depends on what your Mazal is. So that's a very important area to understand as to what the limitations of the free will are in areas like our career, in choosing a wife, in having children. Can you choose what kind of child you want to have? Maybe the color, maybe. Well, because if you marry a blonde, right, the chances are, because of the genes, right? But you just can't choose everything. So we will see what can be decided by us and what cannot be decided by us, and what is this Mazal all about. However, in talking about free will, we have to confront the more difficult question is, if Hashem does know, and Hashem does know the future, doesn't that dictate, or doesn't that determine already what will be? And if that's the case, if there's some predestination or predetermination, as they call it, maybe that's infringing on the free will. In other words, we are basically obligated to do as He knows. Not simply as He wishes, right? But as He knows. Does His knowledge in any way limit us? Now we know from our schooling that Hashem does not limit our free will. Generally, there are times that He does, but generally speaking, He does not limit us. But here we're faced with a question, even though a lot of books have been written about it, a lot of articles, a lot of talk, I never understood what's the difficulty of this question. I really don't understand what's so difficult. Because the way I always understood Hashem's knowing of the future is at least we know it's much better, but at least why should his knowledge of the future be any less than astrologers? Now, astrologers are not accurate predictors of the future. But let's assume we do have one astrologer or a palm reader who can tell you to the T everything exactly. And there are psychics who even do that. I mean, and Hashem, of course, there's no comparison. If they can know the future, then why can't Hashem know the future? What does one thing have to do with another? What does Hashem knowing the future event have to do with dictating to the individual, okay, now that I know you're going to do it. If I know what you're going to do tomorrow, does that mean I'm influencing you in any way? You're in New York, and I know what you're going to do tomorrow. Does that mean I'm influencing you? Your actions are not being in any way whatsoever influenced by my knowledge of a future event. That's assuming one can know precisely what is going to happen, what is going to be done without fail. In other words, that's for sure going to happen. And this answer, this explanation is mentioned by other rabbis too. I'm not the only one to say so. So I really never fully understood what the difficulty was with this question. You know, Hashem somehow knows, and that knowledge does not interfere. Now, the reason why this is so, in my eyes, again, so simple, is because of the following. When it comes to free will, what are we really saying? We're saying that this individual made a decision on their own, without any outside influence, without being forced into it, on their own. In other words, we are knowledgeable of the fact that we have this tool called free will. We know about that, right? And we can exercise it for good or for bad. And if we're told that this individual was not influenced, coerced in any way, he on his own made the decision, so what if somebody has knowledge from before? The main thing is that what happened, that decision was purely his decision. Nobody even spoke to him about it. Nothing. He was not even influenced by the news, by his parents, because then you can blame them. No, completely no influence. Somehow he decided on his own. Can't that happen? Yes, we're told he has true free will to make a decision whether tomorrow morning he's going to get up and put on tefillin, whether if it's a woman, if she's going to light candles on time, or she's just going to ignore it. She's making the decision right now. Is there anything that's going to influence her decision? No. I mean, she may be knowledgeable, she may be trained, she may be used to it. Okay, but see, every time that she goes and lights the candles, she's making a decision to do so. Whether it's out of habit or not, it's still a real decision. It's not instinct. Right? When we explain the difference between human beings and animals, we explain that animals are more like robots. They live by instinct, they react through instinct. They don't have the capability of making decisions, of judging right from wrong, of being able to determine what to do based on some conscientious thing. They will just do it by instinct. They're afraid, they're going to run away, they're going to attack, and so forth. So human beings are capable of making decisions. So why should Hashem's knowledge beforehand in any way interfere with that? The reason why there is some clamor, I guess we can use the word for it, people talking so much about it, making so much noise, because the Rambam does allude to something very similar. Rambam says, the Egyptians maybe perhaps shouldn't get punished. After all, Hashem decreed that the Jewish people will be enslaved in Egypt for a number of years. He decreed. It was a decree. If it was a decree, then why should the Egyptians be punished? Hashem decreed that will happen in Egypt. So what does the Rambam say? But every Egyptian could say, he didn't mean me, he meant my neighbor. He should be the guy to give the patch, to hit, to enslave, to be cruel. He should be the guy. It doesn't have to be me, I don't have to be the bad guy. So the Rambam says, because every Egyptian could have an excuse not to behave in the cruel, evil way, he did it anyway, then he's punished, because he could have said it doesn't have to be me. Hashem did not decree which Egyptian should do it. Hashem just decreed it should be done in Egypt. It will happen in Egypt. And there will be somebody to do it. Don't worry about it. It doesn't have to be me. So whoever did it gets punished, because it didn't have to be him. It would have been someone else. You see, this is an interesting aside, another note that the Rambam touches on, which is somewhat related to the same topic. That Hashem, even though decrees that something needs to happen, the individuals themselves, because they have free will, do not have to go along with that decree. And Hashem will find somebody who's prepared to do it. Hashem doesn't have a problem with finding the right candidates or volunteers to do it. So as a result of this mode of thinking, that there's some decree going on, that is what leads to this question that perhaps Hashem's knowledge is a form of decree. If Hashem knows, then it needs to happen. If it needs to happen, then the human being perhaps does not have complete free will. It's going to happen anyway. You see what I mean? That's what led to this question. People have a hard time understanding that if he knows that it's going to be, that perhaps it's going to happen anyway. And their understanding of free will is that there has to be completely free will without any outside knowledge. But that's not exactly so. We see this idea of free will amongst human beings in many areas. For example, let's say somebody has to die. That is his kaparat, that is his tikkun for something that he did. And Hashem decides how he's going to die. It's going to be through some guy who's going to hold him up. A hold up. How is that going to happen? Hashem knows that this man is going to be walking down the street at 12:30 at night in Harlem. Right? Not in the Bronx, in Harlem, right? Harlem is yeah. And somebody's going to be there who has not only the ability but the desire to, as soon as he sees the first white man, to hurt him. So what does Hashem do? Hashem mafgish otam. Hashem made the two come together. Did he tell that man to kill this man? No. But he knows that man is capable of doing it. He will do so if he's faced with someone who, at a certain hour, and there's nobody else in the street, that he is capable, and basically puts the two together. So did Hashem bring that about? Yes and no. Indirectly, he brought the two together, but he did not tell that man, kill him. That man has free will. The killer has free will. He does not have to pull the trigger. He does not have to pick up a knife to stab. Right? They completely and at all times have free will. But Hashem knows that he's capable. He will do it. He says, you know what? I'm just going to put this one in his way. Because that's what needs to happen to him. And the same is true with ma'akeh. The Torah tells us something incredible. Put up a ma'akeh. Ma'akeh is a parapet or some barrier on your stairs, on your roof. So whoever is walking there should not fall. Ki yipol hanofel mimeno. What do you mean ki yipol hanofel? In order that the one who's going to fall should not fall. The one that's going to fall? You mean somebody who's going to for sure fall? Yeah. Somebody's going to for sure fall. Why should it be in your house? Why should it be in your place? Why should it happen in your place? You put up the ma'akeh, you put up the barriers, so you are not in any way indirectly guilty of contributing to his death. So what do we see from this? This man he's going to fall. He's going to fall somewhere. But it doesn't have to be in your house. So in other words, the fact that Hashem knows that he's going to fall does not mean that person has to happen in that house. That person has still the free will of, you know what, I don't want it to happen here. I'm going to put up a ma'akeh. Because if the ma'akeh is not there, Hashem says, you know what, it's going to happen here. It may happen there. So the human being does have a great deal of free will to prevent certain things from happening. But Hashem hasn't decreed, or Hashem has desired something to happen. Yes, somehow it will happen. You don't have to be the one involved. Another example of this is with the brothers of Yosef. They're about to kill Yosef. Then they decide, no. What does Reuven do? What does he suggest? Let's throw him in the pit in the meantime. His idea and his plan was to save him, to pick him up later, take him home. But the Torah pretty much tells us that pit was a dangerous place. It was not full of water, but it was full of snakes and scorpions. Well, guess what happens when you're amongst poisonous snakes and scorpions? Isn't that just as dangerous? The Zohar says no. It's not as dangerous as being in the hands of a human being. Because a human being has free will, and snakes and scorpions don't. A snake will not bite you if you're a tzaddik. There's only one exception to that. If it's a very crowded place and you step on them, well, if you step on them, then their reaction may be to bite, to strike back. But if it's not very crowded, they won't go after you if it's not meant to be. Just like the lions didn't go after Daniel, even though they were hungry. The Gova Arayot and the lions then, they didn't go after him. Why? Because he had that Tselem Elokim, he had the image of God on him. The image of God on him, an animal is supposed to be fearful of a human being. Is it a miracle? Yes, it is, but it's not. He has a Tselem Elokim. If you have a Tselem Elokim, the dogs won't bark at you, they won't bite you, they won't attack you. A real Tselem Elokim, they're going to leave you alone.
We're not supposed to put ourselves in this account.
Of course not. We're not supposed to put ourselves in this account because we don't know in what level we are. We don't take chances. Right? So anyway, so what do we see from this? That a human being, like the brothers of Yosef, do have tremendous free will. As opposed to animals. So therefore, had Yosef been in their hands, he would have needed tremendous merits to be saved. Hashem needs to perform a miracle for a human being to be saved from the hands of another human being. In other words, a human being can actually lose his life and leave this world before his time if he was in the hands of a human being. The typical example is going to war. You're a soldier. Your mazal may have been to live to 83. 83 according to your mazal. But what can we do? Israel was at war and the soldiers went to Lebanon and some of them were in the tank and they got a direct hit and got killed. What can we do? At the age of 21. He was supposed to live to 83, yeah, but he was in a war. And a war is a dangerous zone. There are human beings who have free will, who can shoot. And unless Hashem intercedes and the missile misses, or the tank goes a different way, or the terrorists get killed before they're able to shoot, whatever, it needs Hashem to intercede, to make a miracle. And miracles don't just happen wholesale. It requires merits. So we're talking about human beings having free will, and the rules of the game are different when there is free will. However, I saw a nice explanation by the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who explains this question as to why Hashem's knowledge beforehand is not an interference in any way. And he says that Hashem's knowledge is similar to something that has already happened. If you know about something that has already happened, is that a big deal? Of course not. Once it happens, everybody can know about it. Hashem's knowledge of somebody doing something, it is as though it had already happened. In other words, the action is he calls it the siba, that is the cause, and Hashem is the mesovev. In other words, it's after the fact. He knows it already after the fact. What does that mean? It means that Hashem knows at the time that it's happening. And since Hashem, as others explain, is me'al hazman, is above the time, for Hashem there is no time, so Hashem knows exactly at the time that it's happening, that it's happening. So there is no knowledge from before, because there is no before. There is no such thing as before. As it happens, Hashem knows. In other words, as a result of Hashem seeing this somehow, that it's happening, He knows it. Because it has happened. By Him it has already happened. That's also a nice explanation.
That's why some people have psychic experiences when they're asleep.
Right.
Because part of their neshama goes up.
Right.
And they're above the physical
world
that's limited to time and space.
Right.
So they're able to see above that.
Yeah, I guess so. It could be, yeah. They're able to see more.
Past, present, and future.
Just like you could see in a dream certain things that you could not see in the physical world while you are awake. For similar reasons, yeah. Yeah.
Rabbi say everything's from Shemayim except Yirat Shemayim, so that only the ability in terms of free will to do good or bad is within our scope, that all the other actions we do are controlled upstairs, Rabbi. So the only free will we have is in the areas of whether to do good or bad, good or evil.
Right. That's a topic we're going to be B'ezrat Hashem discussing in a couple of weeks from now when we talk about the difference between mazal and free will. In what exact areas do we have free will? It's like you said, basically in doing good or evil. There's a few additional areas.
If you go down to the yogurt store and get chocolate over an L, is that your free will? to buy chocolate or vanilla, which one you
That's not even so much free will. Some would call that a preference. Because free will we use when we make decisions. Even though that's a decision, it's more of a preference, and a preference is dictated by what your body is inclined by its nature. But you're right, it's still a decision that is being made, and there is an area, since you mentioned it, there's an area that's, I would call, a neutral area. In other words, Hashem did not decide, and you did not decide. In other words, it's an area that He will allow you to do so as long as it does not interfere with your mazal. See what I mean? In other words, He will allow you to do something. He did not tell you to do it. It wasn't in the hands of Hashem. He didn't move you to do that. You did not necessarily decide it completely either. In other words, He allowed you to do it as long as it does not interfere with the mazal. That's a possibility too, because otherwise we have to explain how come there's this idea that Hashem is in control of everything. Hashem is in control of every decision you make. In other words, where's the free will? In other words, in an area which is not good or bad. Because if it's good or bad, then we already said that that's of course yours. But in those areas that are not good and bad, the typical example is moving to Israel. Aliyah. Now, some can say, making Aliyah, that's from Hashemayim. Either I will or not. No, it's my decision. Hashem does not get involved. What do you mean Hashem does not get involved? Hashem gets involved in everything. And the answer is, it's one of those neutral areas. It belongs in a neutral area that Hashem says, it's up to you, but I will not let you do it if it's going to destroy your mazal. If it's going to go against what you're supposed to accomplish in this lifetime. He will not allow you to do something that will be self-defeating. So if it does not hurt, we will let you. Another example is divorce. Even though divorce you can categorize as something good or bad, but it's not necessary. It's one of those neutral things. Hashem says, listen, I think that you can get along just fine. If you were to work on it, on the marriage, you would be able to survive, maybe not be best friends, but survive. And the guy says, no, I've had enough. Or she says, I've had enough. They're making a decision, and Hashem is just allowing it to happen. And Hashem may be, of course, crying, shedding tears about the marriage that just is destroyed by two selfish people. You're right. An example would be selfish, but another example would be where one of them does not want to work on themselves. They have a problem. So it's not always selfishness, that's true. But I call it selfishness because it's usually a person is interested in something that he wants that he cannot get, even if it's peace of mind. He wants peace of mind. And his wife is a kvetcher, as we say in Yiddish. She's a nag. Or the other way around, I have to be fair. She wants peace of mind, and he's a nervous wreck, or he has a temper. So even though it's not fair for me to call it selfish, but it is. In other words, you're interested in peace of mind. You don't want to deal with this problem. Now, is she right or wrong? Maybe she's right. I didn't say she's wrong for being selfish. There's nothing wrong with protecting yourself, with having peace of mind. But you're compromising something. You're perhaps destroying your home, and perhaps you did not consider what's the best for the children, not for yourself. Yes, for you will have peace of mind, but what about the kids? Sometimes you really have to weigh the question, is it better for them to grow up hearing their parents fight twice a week, but living with parents and having some decent days? Or is it better to break up the home, let them not see fights, and single-handedly bring them up, either the woman or... It's a tough question to decide. Depends on their age, depends on the problems. Every case is different. But it's still a decision that's being made. And of course, if it's a complete mistake, then Hashem, of course, does miracles. And He sends the right guy to reconcile between the two. And, everyone has a combination, and if you just know the right combination, you may be able to tap onto their feelings and their mind and see what's really bothering them, perhaps find a solution. And there are solutions. Not everybody knows what they are, not everybody searches for them, and that's why there's just so many divorces. They haven't found the right people, perhaps, or they haven't tried hard enough, and many times this is, of course, the wrong decision, not the right decision. So in talking about free will, even though it's pretty self-explanatory, even though it's something somewhat easily to understand, that we have the ability to make certain decisions, and there are certain limitations. Nevertheless, I do want to point out that there is one small difference in this free will area between what it was before Adam HaRishon sinned and after. In other words, we were given this very powerful tool by Hashem through our neshama, which is a Helek Eloka Mimal. It's a part of Hashem. So it makes us in some ways like Him, right? In some ways, we can make decisions, we can reason. We're His partners. This free will was not always the same. Just like you asked before about Mashiach, it will be somewhat different after Mashiach comes. So it was different before the sin of Adam HaRishon. Before the sin of Adam HaRishon, we are told that the Yetzer Hara was outside of him. After the Chet of Adam HaRishon, the Yetzer Hara is within us. How do we explain the difference? That right now, we look at a sin subjectively, and before Chet Adam HaRishon, we looked at it objectively. You see the difference between objective and subjective? In other words, objectively, we were able to recognize it and deal with it very naturally. Whereas subjectively, we actually have to decide now. Every time a person sees or is in a situation where he can sin, he has to make a decision. He has to think about it. It is not so natural for him to resist. He's making a decision. It may be an easy decision for him. It may be a hard decision. But it's no longer objective and clear what needs to happen.
Just because good and evil got mixed up.
Right now they're all mixed up, and therefore you're right. Thank you. It needs more reflection. You need to discern which is what. That is more complicated. So the free will has to work a little bit harder now to make the right choice. And as I've explained before, it's not so hard because subconsciously in the neshama of every human being, the neshama knows the basics of what is right from what is wrong. I gave the example of the BIOS and the ROM memory. I don't know if you were here. That's built into the computer. It just knows how to do certain things. You don't have to program it every time to print. It knows certain things. The problem is, what is the Yetzer Hara? Yetzer Hara is like a floppy disk. There's some people who already forgot what floppies are, right? It's like a fact that you try to boot the computer through the floppy and you try to circumvent the boot sector of the hard disk, which has the instructions of how to load the programs into the computer, into the memory. So the Yetzer Hara tries to circumvent, but if you were to follow the neshama, you need an honest person who's honest, who wants to know the truth, then it would by default do the right thing most of the time. Why do I say most of the time? Because you still have to learn. You have to learn the rules of this world, and that is what the Sheva Mitzvot B'nai Noach are, the 7 Noachite laws. That is what the 613 Mitzvot are for us. We have so much to learn. But by default, the Neshama would know many things, would know right from wrong, even if it were not to go to school. Yeah.
The issue of free will, we may think we're making decisions, but the machshavas that are coming down, and we get these thoughts, they're really being beamed down from Shemayim, so we're really not making the decision, even though we think we are. The thoughts that are implanted in your brain are, like you said, your decision to send your son to this yeshiva. Where did it come from, Rabbi? It came from Shemayim. You just said that.
Right.
You thought you made that decision. You didn't make the decision. It was implanted.
Obviously, that's the area where we don't have so much decision making. We think we're making the decision. Even in those areas that we don't really make the decision, we still think we're making the decision.
Right, we do.
But we're not. We are like puppets. There are certain things that happen in life that we, even though we were there, we went there, we participated, we spoke, but we didn't really make the decision. Hashem conducted us, in other words, took us there, and basically made it happen. It was not our real decision, like the decision of putting on tefillin or not, giving tzedakah or not. That's a real decision.
But that's good or bad. That's doing the best.
Exactly, right. This, on your example, the yeshiva, yeah, you're right. It's not completely our decision. Anyway, so what happens therefore in life, now that we know that the human being has free will, we can understand something very interesting, an incredible phenomenon. Wouldn't it be nice to be a cow? You don't have to worry about paying bills, shelter, clothing, food. It eats grass. You know how many problems human beings have with between illnesses and raising children and looking for a job and deciding what to wear tomorrow and a tie and shoes to match, right? There's so many problems that human beings have. So if you pay close attention to all the problems that human beings have, the decisions that they have to make, the ups and downs in life, the disappointments, what does that show? It does not only show you that the human being is different, it also should awaken you an understanding that maybe this world is not what we're really here for. Because if we were only meant to be in this world, if this is everything there is, then why should we, the crown of creation with free will, be worse off than animals? We're worse off. We are worse off. Think about it.
Well, it appears to be we're worse off.
Right, it appears, right. If this is everything there is, there's no afterlife, what is the free will for? Why are we making decisions? Why would we all this? It must be that this is just a corridor. I mean, we know that, but unfortunately, not every Jew knows that. Not every Goy knows that. That this is just a corridor. There's an afterlife. There's a world of reward for our actions. Our free will are important because it's going to make a difference on what kind of an afterlife we have. That is why we have all these nisyonot, challenges. All these nisyonot, what are challenges? I have to be challenged. The cow is not challenged. Right? What kind of challenges? To do or not to do decisions. What do I need the free will for? No, because your actions are very important. They're going to determine what kind of an afterlife you're going to have. They're going to determine if you're going to be rewarded or not. That's why this point is important. And that is why in Judaism a very important point is emphasized. And that is that the Jew is rewarded according to his efforts and not according to his successes or his failures. Because success or failure, many times is determined by one's mazal. You would like to do a lot of things in this world, but you can't accomplish everything. That depends on Hashem's plan for you. That depends on your mazal. But you will be rewarded according to your efforts. Whereas, look at the difference between a Jew's performance in this world and an electronic engineer that works for what's that company in? Not IBM. The company down by the Newport Beach area, or
Rockwell.
right? Yeah, Rockwell and those Boeing. Those industries. Would you get paid if you worked there and you didn't accomplish anything? You didn't do anything?
No.
Would they pay you just for sitting in your chair? No. If you're a Jew, even though you didn't accomplish a lot, you get rewarded. Even if you failed, you tried to learn the Gemara, but you didn't understand it. You're going to get rewarded for it anyway. A tailor, if he does not make a suit, he's not going to get paid for it. But I tried. I really took your wool, and I tried to make the best suit, but it just didn't come out. Sorry, I'm not going to pay you for your work. But I've worked 2 days on your suit, but it didn't come out. This is not what I ordered. This is not what I want. A Jew who does everything, even though he didn't do the best job possible, Hashem says, I'm going to reward you for your efforts. Yes?
So what does it say in Pirkei Avos if a person says that he tried and he couldn't, and he didn't succeed, you shouldn't believe him?
No, that's something else. It is mentioned by the rabbis that if you claim, Yagati v'lo matzati al tamin. In other words, if you made an effort and nothing came out of it, it's impossible. Something will come out of a true effort that is being made. It may take you a long time, it may take you many times. There's no such thing as a person trying and not succeeding, not accomplishing something. Right? In other words, it's impossible. If you try, something good will come out of it. Same thing as it says, if you did not try. If you did not try, you also can't accomplish anything. You won't find anything.
But doesn't this contradict what you just said? That
No, what?
it's the effort that counts and not the actual accomplishment.
Right. It's the effort. That's what I'm saying. The effort is the one that's counting, even though you're not accomplishing a lot. Just for the effort, you're getting credit. In other words, just for trying, you're also getting rewarded for the effort. Plus, you get reward for any accomplishment that came out of it. Right? Let's take an example. I mean, you learned the Gemara once. You didn't understand it. You think that half an hour of trying went to waste? You will get credit for it. This is an example of learning the Gemara. It's not an example of a mitzvah, because a mitzvah, either it was performed or not. But with learning, it is possible that you didn't understand anything. What would be another example?
In other words, you meet a Jewish boy.
Go ahead. Mm-hmm. Yes.
You said, what's another example? So I said, if you're counseling a Jewish fellow that's considering coming to you for advice, planning on marrying a non-Jewish girl, and you counsel him based on your tape that you once and you're unsuccessful, Rabbi. So do you get credit for your effort that you tried to persuade him?
Of course, yeah.
But you were unsuccessful.
That's another example. I mean, you tried, you spoke, because that in itself is a mitzvah too. Just trying, and speaking and trying, even though your words didn't go anywhere, didn't fly, right? Yeah, he didn't listen to you. Yeah.
So if a person says that
you attempted to do something, you attempted to do something, it just didn't work out. You'll get credit for that too.
If he tried and he didn't succeed, you should believe him then.
No, that's something else. What you're talking about is a certain action, a certain mitzvah, where it could happen that a person tried and didn't succeed. But the rabbis are referring to is a sincere effort being made to understand something, to learn Torah. A person cannot excuse himself, I tried it and nothing works. If you try long enough, it will work. Don't use that as an excuse that you're not able to understand. If you try hard enough, you will succeed. If it's not on your own, then you ask someone. See what I mean? So it's two separate things. There are actions, there are things in life that even if we try, we may not succeed because it wasn't meant to be. A certain action, but not learning or trying to understand a mitzvah or a portion of the Torah. That you cannot just say, I tried, unless of course it's Kabbalah or something, that it is impossible. Anyway, rabbis tell us also in Pirkei Avot, Lefum Tzara Agra, that according to one's effort, is the reward. That is where we learn from that Judaism rewards one for effort. Therefore, two individuals do the exact same mitzvah, but one tried harder, one had to walk a longer distance to shul. Then the other one, the exact same mitzvah of prayer, of going to shul, you think they're both going to be rewarded equally? No, the one who went farther, the one who had to work harder, the one that grew up in a non-religious home, he gets rewarded much more for the same mitzvah of putting on tefillin, of wearing tzitzis, of eating kosher, everything more than his neighbor who grew up in a religious home. They both are equal as far as their schooling, their accomplishments, their mitzvot. One will be more rewarded. Why? Because it's the effort. It's how much you invested, how hard you worked to do the same thing. Imagine somebody breaking his head to understand something. He will be rewarded even more. If it's more difficult for you to give tzedakah, and you nevertheless do it. Same thing. Everything depends on the effort invested. Now, this bechira chofshi, this free will, is a tremendous asset that we don't realize. Not only, of course, does it give us the ability to perform and to accomplish, but if one exercises his free will wisely, then that will enable him to escape the Yetzer Hara and not fall in the trap of the ta'avot of the bodies, of the desires of the body. In the very beginning, when we spoke about the human being, the neshama and the guf, I explained how the human being is half animal and half neshama, the spiritual, from above. The problem is that many people, of course, follow the Yetzer Hara, and they only think about their bodily needs, the physical, material world, and not about what the neshama needs. If a person exercises his free will properly, he will come to understand and come to realize that it's silly to just think and take care of the body and not of the neshama. Because the body in the end goes to the grave, nothing remains from it. But the neshama is, of course, eternal. The neshama's ma'asim will make a difference in the upper world. That's what I have to focus on. So this is a very important point, because you know what it tells us? If that's what free will is intended to do, then that's incredible. If that's the case, the majority of the world is not thinking, and therefore not exercising their free will properly. Therefore, by default, they're succumbing to the Yetzer Hara. In other words, there's a default. The default is you will do what your body wants, because you're living in the physical world. Unless you stop to think, unless you actually make decisions all the time, between right and wrong, the default will be for the human being to follow what his body wants. He wants money, he wants pleasure, he wants women, he wants this, he wants that, he wants this, he wants that. If a person doesn't have, if he doesn't use his free will properly, he will be nishaf, as we say in Hebrew. He will be swept away by his yetzer, which is default. The human being, the physical animal in him, well, why not? What's wrong with taking care of yourself? They tell this to you all the time in the radio and the news. You owe yourself a vacation. Go ahead and spend your hard-earned money on yourself. You owe it to yourself. You deserve a vacation. You really do. You work hard. You can go to Hawaii, with a minyan, of course. Oh, you just came back from there, right? With a minyan, of course, with a Sefer Torah and everything, and kosher, of course. But take care of yourself. Go scuba diving and enjoy life. And after all, many people will tell you only live once, right? That's the Yetzer Hara, yeah.
Right, but the robe, like you said, the rest of the world, but the robe of Jews also are in that same category. The Tanuch and Ishma, Rabbi, they don't have the Torah foundation, so it's easily for them to go into the default mechanism of coming to the Yetzer Hara. They have no foundation to is there any excuse?
No, I told you before that the human being's neshama is operational. It knows right from wrong, but we don't let it express itself. We don't even give it a chance once a week. What's Shabbat for? Hey, stop your work. Don't think about your physical body. Don't think about this physical world. Think about your neshama. That's what Shabbat is all about. And these people are not even resting on Shabbat, so they don't give their neshama a chance to think about, hey, what's the most logical question for a human being to ask himself? What am I doing here? What is this all for? Why did my parents bring me into this world? Go to college, find a job, work so hard, take a chance in getting married, maybe it will work out, maybe not. Have kids, raise them, for who? For what? Just to give me satisfaction? After a number of years, there might be a heart attack, a stroke, or Alzheimer's disease, and everything is gone. Is it all worth it? People don't ask the question.
They don't ask, right?
They don't even ask. They don't stop to ask. But the neshama does have that ability to reason, to think, to ask these questions. That's why in the Haggadah we had the Arba'a Banim, right? The Chacham, the Rasha, the Tam, and we have the Shena Yeder Yishol, the one who doesn't know how to ask the question. And he's in trouble. Because you should be asking questions. You should be stopping and asking. And if he doesn't, you have to open up his mouth. Because if he doesn't open up his mouth to ask a question, you got to open it for him, if he's Jewish, of course. Anyway, so far we've covered the benefits, advantages, of course, of using the free will properly, how it's a powerful tool, how it can make a difference in one's life. And if one does not, of course, uses free will properly, he ends up, of course, going by the Atzata Yetzer Hara, by going through the advice, following the advice of the Yetzer Hara. So I'm going to share with you right now a story, one of my favorite stories of Balei Tshuva, of an example of an individual who used his free will in an incredible way, despite the challenges and the odds. think his name was Rami Khalis. He was a soccer player in Ashkelon, who became a Baal Teshuvah. When he was asked, how did you become a Baal Teshuvah? This is what he said. One day it occurred to me that by playing on Shabbat, I was causing such a big Hilul Shabbat. I was causing a Hilul Shabbat by playing on Shabbat. It occurred to me. And I said to myself, I'm going to make a decision. I'm going to stop playing on Shabbat. And of course, what that meant is that if he were to stop playing on Shabbat, that means his contract would be up. They don't want such a player. So he was prepared to resign. But since he has a contract, he has 2 months to go. So they told me, you know what, finish these 2 months, and then, if you want to go, you have time to think about it, you'll go. What happened during these 2 months that was left? He says the Yetzer Hara played soccer for him. He made the best goals of his entire career. Everybody was amazed. They even asked him, what do you train? How do you do it? I was incredibly amazed myself, he says, because I knew this was not me. This was the Yetzer Hara playing for me. The best goals. Everybody was so impressed that the team manager, is that what he's called?
Coach.
The coach tried to convince him, tried to pressure him through his parents and family that he should not resign. It didn't work. So he went up to the Hanhala, to the directorship, to the committee. Hey, somehow convince him. So what do you think they did? In Israel, there are ways to convince. Listen, we're going to give you a dira bechinam, a free apartment. We're going to raise your salary. Tiyulim lechutz laaretz, we'll give you free travel to chutz laaretz, outside to Europe, right? All the benefits you can imagine. And he was very much right now pressured for buying an apartment. He needed the money. So can you imagine all the pressure that is building up? He's a great player. Everybody wants him. And look at all these promises. He was afraid he was going to say yes. But at the end, Baruch Hashem, he came the last day after 2 months and he signed his resignation. And he left. Anyway, he went to the unemployment office to get another job. And they had pity on him. So they gave him a job as a gardener. And what do you think his job was? At the soccer stadium, where he used to play. He saw the players coming to play, his friends, and he came to plant roses and flowers. And what he used to make in 1.5 hours of playing, he now was making it in a month. Nevertheless, he said, I will never exchange my Shabbat for this. You know what strength and courage this takes? But this is an example of free will, pure free will, nothing else whatsoever. However, there are some times that people cannot, you mentioned, get out of their situations and think about their problem, and they need outside help, and that's where Hashem sometimes comes and helps. There's a story of Bruria and Rameir in the Gemara. Rameir had terrible neighbors. They were giving him a hard time. So he was trying to pray that they should die. And his wife tells him, Yitamu hata'im min haaretz, it says, not choteim. You have to pray that they should do teshuvah. Now, instead of praying for their demise, pray that they should do teshuvah. He prayed that they should do teshuvah, and they did teshuvah. They needed a little bit of a boost. They needed a prayer. Sometimes a person, of course, needs a boost. And Hashem does send all sorts of messengers and tries to push an individual, because by himself, on his own, he may not be able to do it. That is what the rabbis call ein havush matir atzmo. One who's in prison cannot free himself from prison. He needs somebody from the outside to open up, to somehow give him an incentive. Yeah.
If someone's a Rasha or a Moser, we don't pray for him, Rabbi.
No, that's something different.
That's the same concept.
No, that's a totally different individual. That's an enemy. Yeah, troublemakers we're talking about here. It's different. Yeah. Anyway, there are individuals who have a hard time to do teshuvah. Rabbis tell us, "Me'uvat lo yuchal litkon," somebody who has become so crooked, it's hard to repair him. Who is that? One who's parash min Torah, one who used to learn Torah and went away from the Torah. And the question is, what do you mean he can't fix it? He can do teshuvah, but it's such a tremendous chilul Hashem, as the Rambam says, "Kidvar Hashem bazah." By being disrespectful, by showing such disrespect for the Torah, by having once been learning Torah and now moving away from it, the Halul Hashem is so great, it's very difficult to do teshuvah, it's very difficult to atone for that sin. Nevertheless, does that mean that a person should give up hope? Never. Never give up hope. That was a mistake Elisha ben Avuya did. Elisha ben Abuya, his name was also Acher. He totally left everything. There's a whole story behind how he left everything, stopped believing in everything, became somewhat of a heretic. And why did he give up hope? Because he heard once a heavenly voice saying, Shuvu banim shobevim chutz mi Acher. Return to me, except for Acher. In other words, he thought that means that he has no way to do teshuvah. They're not going to accept his teshuvah. The commentators say he should not have listened to the heavenly voice. Rabbi Soloveitchik says that one of the ideas of what it means is that they said Elisha can return, but not Acher. Elisha and Acher were the same people. In other words, if the individual still has the personality of Acher, he cannot return. But if he wants to be what Elisha ben Abuya was a great man. In Pirkei Avot he's mentioned. In other words, if the individual still has the personality of Acher, then he cannot return. But what really they were telling him, that he cannot go back with Tshuva, is that he cannot get help from above. He has to do it on his own. Because that's exactly what happened to Rabbi Eliezer ben Dordaya. Rabbi Eliezer ben Dordaya was also a big sinner. He committed the terrible sins. But when it came the moment to do Teshuvah, he put his head on his knees and realized that if they don't accept him, he's going to cry himself to death. And he cried himself to death. In other words, with teshuvah, and they accepted him in the last minute, even though he understood that he has no teshuvah. He cried himself to death. He understood that it all depends on him. It only depends on me. They will not help me from the outside. When a person is so distant, has committed so many grave sins, they may not help him from the outside. But if he does it on his own, somehow, if he's smart enough, has the zechut avot, or somehow decides on his own, of course they will accept anyone. Anyway, I just want to finish with an incredible midrash that somehow the goyim put it into different words. It's very funny, but it's very true. This is approximately what it goes. There was a man who once had 4 wives. Did you hear about this? This is approximately how it reads. He had 4 wives, and he loved the 4th wife the most. He adored her with rich robes, treated her to delicacies. He took great care of her, and only gave her the best. His 3rd wife he loved very much too. He was proud of her, showed her off to his friends, and he was always afraid that she would go off with some other man. The 2nd wife was really his confidant. She took care of his business. Whenever there was a problem, he went to her, and she would help him out. And he, of course, was very considerate of her. The 1st wife was very loyal to him, always made contributions to maintain his business, but he didn't love her so much. He hardly took care of her. The time came for him to leave this world. He was on his deathbed, and he realized he's going to be by himself, and he asked his wife to come along with him. So the 4th wife said, "No way. I'm not going with you." And as soon as he heard that, of course, it was like a stab in the back. The 3rd wife says, "Life is too good. When you die, I'm going to marry someone else." And of course, that hurt him very much. The 2nd wife says, "I can't come with you only till the grave, but not after that. I will take you to the cemetery. I will attend your funeral, but that's it." And the 1st wife says, "I love you so much, I'll go wherever you go." And this 1st wife was skinny, suffered from malnutrition, and he, on his deathbed, says, "You're the one that I should have taken care of so much more." And he feels terrible. The 4th wife is our body that we take care of, and we treat so nicely with all the delicacies. We shower it with all the riches. And eventually, of course, where does it go? To the grave? We don't take it with us. Number 3, the 3rd wife is our possessions. They go to others. They marry someone else, the IRS, the lawyers. The 2nd wife is the family. How far can they go with us? To the grave. And the 1st wife is our neshama, or our ma'asim tovim. our good deeds, which unfortunately we neglected the most all the years. Very important and beautiful Musar Haskel that every individual has these 4 wives and has to be careful with treating the neshama, of course, the best, because that's what matters the most, that's what goes with him. And that is really the Musar that Rabbi Israel Salanter gave when he once came late at night to a town and he saw a shoemaker working late at night. He saw a candle. He said, "You're still working this late at night?" He says, "Rabbi, you see this candle? As long as the candle is lit, I can still do work, I can still repair shoes." The rabbi says, "Wow, I just learned something. The candle is the neshama. As long as the neshama doleket, as long as the neshama is lit, as long as we're alive, we can still do repair work, we can still do teshuvah. Even if a person has succumbed to his yeses, to his ta'avot, has made many mistakes, made the wrong decisions, used his free will in the wrong way, nevertheless, if he stops for a moment and thinks a little bit about life, he can always make a U-turn. Hashem will always accept a U-turn. But hopefully it should not be too late at night in life, because nobody knows how long he's going to be here. And that is the favor that Hashem does with us, with giving us Rosh Hashanah every year, to take time off to think about life and death, about the Day of Judgment. These are very important issues. We are continuously given a chance to repair. We're continuously given a chance to exercise our free will in the right way. But without the Torah, without any guidance, it's a lot more difficult. A lot more difficult. That is why it's a tremendous big mitzvah, especially in our generation, to suggest to all those, as we mentioned before, who do not know on their own, to at least guide them to the water. Like the psychologists say, you can only bring a horse to water, you cannot force him to drink, but to bring him to water. Show him the waters of the Torah. And when they see the waters of the Torah, many, Bezat Hashem, will become stronger and will eventually, Bezat Hashem, do teshuvah.